It was one of those rare, cool evenings in Los Angeles, where the air carried a gentle breeze and the city lights glimmered against the night sky. In a small, tucked-away restaurant known for its warm, homey feel and simple yet delicious menu, the tables were mostly full. Couples whispered over candlelit dinners, friends laughed over shared plates, and the staff bustled to keep up with orders. Among the patrons that night was a man who, at first glance, seemed to be just another diner. He wore a worn-out baseball cap pulled low over his face, a plain jacket, and a quiet demeanor that let him blend into the crowd. No one gave him a second look, which was exactly what Jim Carrey wanted. For years, Jim had been a household name, beloved for his over-the-top characters and infectious energy. But tonight, he wasn't here as the Hollywood star. He wasn't here to be recognized or to perform. He was here simply to enjoy a quiet meal, something he'd come to cherish in his life outside the spotlight. Jim loved this little place. It wasn't fancy, but it had heart, something he felt was often missing in the bustling world of fame and luxury. He glanced around the room, taking in the laughter, the aromas of fresh-cooked meals, and the cozy hum of life. But as his eyes swept the room, they stopped on a young woman sitting alone in the far corner. She was hunched over a cup of coffee, her hands wrapped around it as though she were trying to draw warmth from its fading heat. Her plate was empty, save for a few crumbs. Her clothes, while clean, were well-worn, and her face carried an expression that tugged at Jim's heart, an unmistakable mix of exhaustion and defeat. Her name was Claire, though Jim didn't know that yet. Claire had moved to Los Angeles 3 years ago with big dreams of becoming an artist. She had talent, no doubt about it. Her sketches were intricate, her paintings vibrant with emotion. But talent alone wasn't enough in a city like this. Between mounting bills, a flooded job market, and the constant pressure to keep up appearances, Claire had found herself stuck. Her dream, once so vivid, now felt like a distant memory. That night, Claire hadn't planned to come to the restaurant. She'd walked by it on her way home and decided to step inside, hoping a quiet corner might offer her a moment of solace. She ordered a coffee, unable to afford much else, and sat there trying to push away the creeping doubts about her future. Jim couldn't take his eyes off her. Something about her reminded him of his younger self, back when he was just a kid from Canada, living in a van with his family and struggling to make ends meet. He knew what it felt like to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders, to feel like giving up was easier than holding on. After a moment's thought, Jim signaled to the waitress. She came over, and he leaned in, speaking softly. "See the girl over there? Can you bring her something nice to eat? Don't tell her who it's from. Just say it's from someone who cares." The waitress nodded, a knowing smile crossing her face. A few minutes later, a warm plate of food was set in front of Claire. She looked up, startled. "I didn't order this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The waitress smiled kindly. "It's on the house. Someone wanted to treat you tonight." Claire blinked, her eyes misting over. She hesitated, looking around the room, but no one seemed to be paying attention to her. Finally, she picked up her fork and took a bite. It was the first real meal she'd had in days. Jim watched from his table, a small smile playing on his lips. But he wasn't done yet. He stood up, adjusted his cap, and walked over to Claire's table. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, his voice warm and casual. Claire looked up, surprised, but nodded. "Sure." Up close, Jim's disguise wasn't foolproof. The lines of his face and the sparkle in his eyes hinted at his identity, but Claire didn't recognize him. To her, he was just a kind stranger. "I'm Jim," he said, extending a hand. "Claire," she replied, shaking it hesitantly. They started talking, and Claire, to her own surprise, found herself opening up. She told Jim about her struggles, her dreams of being an artist, and how those dreams now felt like they were slipping away. Jim listened intently, nodding along. When she finished, he leaned back and smiled. "You know," he said, "I've been there. I know what it's like to feel like the world's against you. But let me tell you something. It's not about where you are now. It's about where you're going. You've got talent, Claire. I can see it in your eyes. Don't let the world make you forget that." Claire felt a lump form in her throat. "It's just so hard," she said, her voice cracking. Jim reached into his pocket and pulled out a small notebook. He scribbled something down, tore out the page, and handed it to her. "Here," he said. "Take this. It's not much, but it might help." Claire unfolded the paper. Inside was a heartfelt note of encouragement, along with a generous sum of cash tucked behind it. At the bottom of the note was a phone number with a message. "Call me if you ever need a friend, and don't stop creating." Before Claire could say anything, Jim stood up. "Take care of yourself, Claire. The world needs your art." And with that, he walked out of the restaurant, leaving Claire sitting there in stunned silence. The next day, Claire decided to look up the kind stranger who had helped her. When she realized it was Jim Carrey, she could hardly believe it. The man who had made the world laugh had taken the time to lift her spirits and remind her of her worth. Inspired by his words, Claire started creating again. She posted her work online, and to her surprise, it started gaining attention. Orders came in, and soon, she was able to cover her expenses. Slowly but surely, she began to rebuild her life. As for Jim, he never spoke publicly about that night. For him, it wasn't about recognition, it was about making a difference. This story is a reminder that kindness, no matter how small, can change someone's life. Jim Carrey's generosity wasn't about being a celebrity, it was about being human. If this story moved you, share it with others. And don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring tales. Let's keep the kindness going.